If you are looking to pick up Super 7 figures, I say check out Entertainment Earth with my influencer code. You get 10% off any in-stock items. Check them out at the link in the description.
Dragon Ball, horror, kaiju, and more. Steven's Toy Reviews.
Hey collectors, going to be Steven here, and welcome to another Super 7 review, where today we're going to be taking a look at Wave 2 of their Toho Ultimates. We're going to be taking a look first and foremost at Burning Godzilla, 1995. Not exactly a straightforward repaint of the 1989 mold that they had. We have a few alterations here or there, and we will, of course, have a side-by-side comparison. Now, with that being said, we did have 3D CGI renders of Burning Godzilla for the promotional images for what we pre-ordered and Paint Masters shortly thereafter, and then we have the final product in hand, and well, here's what I'll say. Super 7 took some feedback into consideration from Wave 1, and of course, they couldn't alter the specific molds of the figure, but they were able to take paint apps into consideration. Is that enough to bring this back into the spotlight for collectors, or is it just enough to keep those who are already fans of Super 7 satisfied, and unfortunately not bring in any new customers? Let's take a look to see whether or not it's going to be worth adding into your collection. I think it's going to be very easy to say that this does not match the renders that Super 7 used to sell the figures, both this one and Mechagodzilla. More so reason being that the paint application for the burning patches does not match really one-to-one. And honestly, we don't really expect one-to-one, but it is a rather notable difference, particularly for the colors. And like I made mention for the Paint Master that was used, I believe it was NYCC after it went up for pre-order as well. Side-by-side comparison will be used at the end. But when it comes to what we actually had in hand, I will talk about the pros first and foremost. They did take into consideration the little eye glint that came in the first wave, and I have to say that the eyes mostly look fine. On the one head sculpt that I have, the eyes are a little off center, but honestly, it's negligible. I'm just pointing it out because this may upset some, and if it does, then, well, you know that it is a possibility. Otherwise, for the teeth, as we will see on the roaring head sculpt, they are more so closely individually painted compared to the dental strips that we saw for Wave 1 and the NYCC release. When it comes to the rest of the paint application for Burning Godzilla, the 1989 releases, Wave 1 and NYCC, they were more so of a glossier, shiny finish, and for the most part, Burning Godzilla is matte. When it comes to the burning paint application, it is going to be more so orange and red and less yellow compared to what was advertised. Your mileage may vary, and a notable instance is that the left application, I guess you might say, thigh for the burning patch is slightly shifted away from the inner portion of the thigh on nearly all of the units that I've seen. This wasn't really something that I was keeping an eye on until it was actually pointed out to me. For the burning patches, we do have them applied in almost with a dry brushing of some kind. I actually don't know if that's going to be dry brushing or it's simply how the patches were applied and then the gray, the black was sticking out. You see what I'm talking about here. We have the black or the gray breaking through. And while I think it is a neat effect, I don't necessarily think it lands all that well considering it's paint. Now, they do have nice looking dorsal plates here for Burning Godzilla when it comes to the burning effect for the dorsal plates, which have been changed from the 1989 release to better reflect what was on the actual suit. So they are made of a softer, translucent plastic, transparent plastic, whatever you want to call it. And I think the application here is pretty solid. Why they didn't do this with the actual figure is beyond me. Cost saving measure, no doubt. But nevertheless, this is cool. And when it comes to that, it goes all the way down up until the point where it does the breakaway for accuracy into the normal colored dorsal plates, but there is actually a fading effect. The little fading effect is done with paint, and it's a little bit brighter compared to the actual color of the dorsal plates, but nevertheless, I will give them an A for effort here. The rest of the gray dorsal plates, though, are just a step above what we got in the original Wave 1, so c'est la vie. Overall, Burning Godzilla here, I think, is in fact a step above Wave 1. However, I do see where some find criticism with this figure, and I don't necessarily think it's as strong as it can be, especially with what we were sold on. For articulation here for Burning Godzilla, it's pretty much going to be the same as the 1989 mold. the original, Heat Ray, and Thirsty for Blood. So we can kind of just skim over this, but I do have the smoke, the steam, the whatever effects attached, just because that is going to play into something that I talked about. This is actually future Steven, chronologically in the review, past Steven. Editing magic. Anyway, the effects. So they are somewhat easy to pop off if you are moving them around. And when they do pop off and they sit, you see, so they can be a little finicky. Something to keep in mind for the leg parts. For the hand and for the collar, however, those are pretty easy to keep on there. I think for safety reasons for the wrist part, it's best to pop the hand off. That's how you swap out the hands too, folks. To get that on there. So we'll move those off to the side. So for articulation, we don't have an articulated jaw. Please contact Super7 and let them know that you would like that instead, if you do. So we do have a ball joint for where the head plugs into the neck, though there is going to be a dorsal plate here, which prevents that from getting him to look up a bit more. So just on this joint, we can twist and turn and rock, and we can spin Godzilla's head all the way around. And then we do have this sculpt here, which plugs in on a ball joint. And that really doesn't move too much either in terms of up and down or left and right, just kind of wiggles around. So just with that, he can look down about that far. And with pushing, well, I guess you can pop his head off, and just for time's sake, we'll go ahead and pop the other head on. All right, there we go. You can look up about that far, look down about that far, and there we go. I've never had that happen before. I promise. It was the first time. Anyway, for the shoulders, they do spin around on a swivel as they're plugged in. Dealers at particular festivals over the summer hate it when you do this, so if there's one you particularly don't like, I'm not encouraging you to do this, but it's something you can do. Anyway, hinge, you can raise and lower the arms just like so Godzilla can T-pose and can assert dominance. That's how the meme goes. There isn't going to be any sort of like butterfly hinge, but what you can do, just as a tip, you can push the arm back a little bit like so, and use the bicep swivel to make it look like Godzilla's getting ready to swipe. So there you go. So yes, we do have dedicated bicep swivels, so you can spin the arm around like so. And then we do have single hinge elbows, right? So arm can go straight down, can go up like that. A little bit more than 90 degree, and that is actually a pretty natural looking cut there. Also, we do have a peg that plugs into the forearm, so we can spin that around. The wrists, as you saw, all of the hands, they're going to be on pegs where they plug in, so that's a swivel, and then hinge. So if you do want to get Godzilla's hand to rock up and down like that instead of in and out, unfortunately you can't do that. For the waist, we just have swivel. We don't really have a ball joint, so you can spin Godzilla around, but that's going to be about it. We don't have any ball joint movement there. A little bit of rocking, but I don't think that's actually a ball joint, kids. For the hips, those are ball joints, which is great. So Godzilla, as you saw, can kick out about that far, forward and back about that far, which is cool. And then we do get a little bit of a rotation, so if you want to do that, you can. Cool. Knees, single hinge knees, neat. Those do spin as well. Nice. Ankles, we do have, this one's a little easier to move, hinge, so we can push forward and back. Cool. Ankle rockers. Tail, same story. You have to push it in all the way. Use heat if it doesn't really work out too well. But we do have a ball joint, and we do have a few ball joints that go all the way. And actually, I was looking back at the prototype, and they had a much easier, nice bend. They kind of gave them like an S shape, which is not possible here. So that was something that was cut out from the prototype. But this is the movement that we're talking about with the tail. So, yep, articulation is, well, he can move. That's about what I can say. It's not over the top amazing, but at the same time, considering that this is basically just going to be a slightly changed, not really, release from wave 1. This is wave 2. It works. It works. Now, I will say it has been noted that they are working to change up the tail articulation. So hopefully 2 waves from now, we will see improvements there. Woo! That's all. Accessories time, and once again, there was a change from render to final product. Your mileage may vary for if you like it. So, for Godzilla, we do have in total 2 alternate head sculpts, 1 closed mouth and 1 roaring. Why no hinge? I don't know. We do have the same hands which were included with 1989, the somewhat open, the really splayed hands and the fists, and for this Burning Godzilla, we do get smoke effect parts, or steam effect parts, whatever you want to call them. So, roaring head, here we go. We do have a little bit of paint slop, but considering that this was pretty much a change, at least what was indicated at the last minute, and this was something they needed to do, though admittedly they needed to do in the first place, okay, they at least tried. Sloppy, but nevertheless, that's what it's going to look like from unit to unit to unit due to quality control. Sometimes it exists, sometimes it's not. Now, for the alternate hands, we already know what those look like, so I'm not really going to focus in on them too much, but we do have the smoke effect parts. Personally, I do like them in hand. Because of needing to be PG-13, there is a particular fluid that men produce, which this has been likened to. However, in hand, it does have a bit of a darker coloration than a bright white, I will say. Unfortunately, when I do my photography with this, I tried under different lighting, and this just really blends in not only to my background, but it also tends to produce a somewhat warmer peach tone. It really isn't the case. I will say that I do think that the sculpted texture on this looks really cool, and there are dedicated spots for each part to go on the figure. When you actually have this in hand, on the inside of the smoke sculpt, you will see that there are individual ridges and so forth for where everything goes. So you would think that this would be flawless. I will say that what is effectively the neck band and the wrist band, those fit in fine, but the 2 pieces that go on the thighs, those really like to fall off, and they are a very, very loose fit for my particular unit, so your mileage may vary. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and do some action shots here, and for the title of an ultimate compared to some of the other lines, yes, we do have the smoke effects here, which are okay. I do like them. They're pretty cool. So my gut tells me that we do have some other effect parts which were omitted. See my NYCC heat ray review, and there's a good chance we may have a variant at some point down the line, or some sort of power-up pack that is going to be reserved with another figure, maybe Godzilla Jr. and Destroyer Aggregate, where we're going to have the heat ray. Who knows? And it was removed for getting you to buy another figure. But we'll talk about another part at the end. So, if you need other effect parts, just like Tamashii Nations is reissuing their fire effect, and you can get buildings, I got videos to help you out. To make things easier for a size comparison on you and myself, here's going to be Wave 2 of the Toho Ultimates alongside the Shogun Godzilla. So this way you can just compare them all because they all dropped at the same time, despite the fact that they wanted to make it easier on the customer's wallet and only limit the figures to 2 per wave. Interesting. So yes, here you go. Now, we all know that we do have Burning Godzilla here and Mecha Godzilla, or Super Mecha Godzilla, and I do know that some folks were looking to have these as replacements or stand-ins for SH Monster Arts or other figures in the 6-inch scale alongside the Shogun as well. Keep in mind, these are 8-inch scale figures. They will not fit in with anything in the 6-inch scale. And I also don't have some of the corresponding figures along with me. At this time, I can't find them, so yeah. And since this is going to be somewhat of a repaint, here's going to be a side-by-side comparison. I have the original 1989 boxed up with the Heat Ray version of the 1989 sculpt. So this way you're going to be able to see where there's going to be a lot of the similarities and the differences between the 89 sculpt and Burning Godzilla. So like I said, the dorsal plates are going to be the big main difference between the two. And interestingly enough, I feel like this one really does actually look more so like the render from the PlayStation 3, 4 Godzilla game. And I believe they based that off of 1989. I think. I might be wrong. But this one, the Burning Godzilla, really does look like that. And they based the scans off of that game from SH Monster Arts figures. So, yeah. It's interesting, don't you think? My opinion. But anyway, yeah. Here's what they look like with different paints. Cool. So buy now, skip, or wait for a deal. So here is going to be the render of Burning Godzilla, which was used to initially solicit. Here is going to be a picture. Source will be in the description for where this came from of the Paintmaster prototype that we saw. And here is going to be the official shipping now photo that Super7 used to indicate that it was shipping out of the warehouse. You can definitely see that there has been a difference of downgrading between each step of the release. Yeah, so here's what I'm going to say. If Super7 is looking to make changes, whether it be because they feel that this is going to be better, like changing the smoke effects from a more so translucent plastic to a white one, okay, that's fine. If you're going to do that, then go ahead and do that. But the customer needs to be updated every step of the way. Some of these changes I think are okay. Personally, now that I'm thinking about it, some gray paint would have really made the smoke effects pop a bit more. But nevertheless, I totally understand why people feel that they didn't get their money's worth. And when you have this many changes from when it's solicited to final delivery, it's definitely a big step back, and people may feel like that they didn't get their money's worth, and possibly this may even be a different product entirely than what was intended. What I will say, though, is I completely understand why folks would skip out on this wave and see it not much of a step up from Wave 1. For Wave 2, I do also see people seeing this as being able to not necessarily toe the line, but just keep them on board for Wave 3, and hopefully that will be better. This will keep Super7 Godzilla fans on board, but I don't think this will bring in anyone new. But I will say that if you're on the fence, hold the line, because my gut tells me we will see a translucent Burning Godzilla with a red spiral ray at some point in the future. And if we don't, well, then I guess you didn't miss anything.